Good morning to everybody. And today that I would like to deal with the international human rights law. And I believe that you could enjoy my lectures. International human rights law is a set of international rules and reinforce the rights and dignity for all human beings, women, men, and children, without discrimination. It involved following the adoption of the 1948 Universal Declaration of the Human Rights, that is UNDHR, and is now supported with a number of the universal and regional instruments such as the International Covenant on the Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights, that is ICESCR, and the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, ICCPR. Other specialized treaties includes International Convention on the Elimination of all forms of the racial discriminations, Convention on the Elimination of all forms of the discrimination against the women, again the Convention against the torture and other cruel, inhuman, or degrading treatment or punishment. Then again, Conventions on the Rights of the Child, Conventions on the Right of the Persons with Disabilities, International Conventions on the Protection of all persons from the enforcement disappearance. According to the international human rights law, when states become parties to these treaties by signing on them, they must refrain from interfering with the exercise of the right outlined in the treaties, take the positive steps to protect them, and restore them when they have been violated. In addition, states have a duty to ensure that the non-state actors don't impair citizens in the realization of these rights. See Geneva Academy of the International Humanitarian Law and Human Rights. Actors working to promote women's equality and to end violence against the women should remind states that they are required to ensure women's right to freedom from violence. It is also important for the VAWG advocates and programs to become familiar with the United Nations judicial and quasi-judicial bodies that oversees the implementation of the treaties, particularly those who are directly accessible to individual claiming to have suffered the violation of the rights. These bodies can issue binding decisions requiring to respondent state to terminate the violation and, where appropriate, to make representation. See the list of these bodies. And the table presents some of the major international milestones regarding the human rights violations against women, including the Security Council resolution presented below. So what it says, what is irrelevant to GBV? So let us say in 1948, Universal Declaration of the Human Rights. I repeat, in 1948, Universal Declaration of Human Rights, the first efforts made to the government to commit the expression of the rights to which all human beings are entitled, which are later served as a blueprint and many international treaties, laws focused on human rights. That is about the first one. Next, 1949, Geneva Convention, IHRL. Established standards in the international law for the humanitarian treatment of victims of war and defend the basic rights of those who captured during the military conflict and established protection for civilians in around a war zone. Nothing, women shall be especially protected against any attack on their honors, in particular rape, enforced prostitutions, or any other indecent assault. In 1951, UN Convention relating to the Statutes of Refugees and the 1967 Protocol defined who is a refugee and set out the rights of the individual who are granted asylum and the responsibility of nations that grant asylum, originally limited to protecting European refugees. After World War II, 1967 Protocol removed the geographic and time limit of the original conventions. Let us say in 1976, there is the International Covenant on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights, that is CESCR. Granted economic and social and cultural rights, ESCR, to individuals. It also establishes the right to health, education, labor, and an adequate standard of living and equal rights of the men and women, that is already stated in CESCR. Now let us see the 1979 Conventions on the Elimination of all Forms of Discrimination Against Women, CEDAW. It established an agenda of action for putting an end to the sex-based discrimination, which led to the creation of the International Bill of Rights for Women. States ratifying the conventions are required to enshrine gender inequality under domestic legislation, repeal all discriminatory provisions in their laws, and enact new provisions to guard against the discrimination against women. In 1991, UN Guidelines for the Protection of the Refugees, Women. A woman and girls have the special protections need to reflect their gender. They need protection against the sexual and physical abuse and exploitations, and protection against the sexual discrimination in the delivery of goods and services. In 1992, CEDAW, General Recommendations number 19 on the violation against women. So if you see this GBV, which impairs and nullifies the enjoyment of the human rights and fundamental freedoms, is a discrimination. I quote, wars, armed conflicts, and their occupation of the terrorists often lead to the increased prostitution, trafficking in women, sexual assault of women, which requires specific protective and punitive measures. In 1993, Vienna Conference, Vienna Declarations and the Program of Action. Declaration on the elimination of the VAWG, that is within parenthesis UNRES 48 by 104. The second global conference to focus exclusively on human rights assets a human rights perspective regarding the violence against the women, obliging the government to respect the fulfill fundamental human rights on equal basis for the men's rights. The human rights of the woman and of the girl child are inalienable, inalienable, integral, and the indivisible part of the universal human rights. Violation of the human rights of women in situations of armed conflict or violation of the fundamental principles of international human rights law and humanitarian law also violation of the kind, including the particular murder, systematic rape, sexual slavery, and the forced pregnancy, required a particular effective response. In 1994, International Conference on Populations and Development, that is ICPD, Cairo, developed the Program of Action, which served as the steering document The United Nations Population Fund, UNFPA, established a sexual and reproductive rights or human rights. Reproductive health services should be particularly sensitive to the needs of women and children, with particularity to those who are victims of this sexual violence. All the necessary measures should be taken to ensure the physical protection of the refugees, in particular the refugee women, refugee children, against the sexual exploitation must all forms of violence. In 1995, Fourth World on Women's Beijing, FWCW, Platform for Action, Beijing 1995. Chapter D, Violence Against, yes, Chapter D, Violence Against Women, particularly vulnerable of war-affected women and girls to violence. Chapter E, Women and Armed Conflict, Addiction to the Sexual Violence, another form of GBV. In 1998, ICC Rome Statute, the treaty that established the International Criminal Court ICC, rape, sexual slavery, enforced prostitution, forced pregnancy, enforced sterilization, or any other form of the sexual violence of a compatible gravity or crimes under the humanity. In 1998, UG Guiding Principle on International Displacement, special attention should be paid by the health needs of the women, including the access to the female health care products and services such as reproductive health care, as well as appropriating the counseling for the victims of sexual and other abuses. 1999 SEDAW General Recommendation number 24 of the Women's and Health. Special attention should be paid to the needs of the women, including the access to the female health care providers and services such as the reproductive health care, as well appropriate counseling for the victims of sexual and other abuses. In 2005, World Summit, that is 2005, Millennium Development Goals, and World Summit 2005, MDGs, several strong reference to ending violence against the woman and the girl child in the situation of conflict. Then, violation of the women's rights and women and girls, sexual violence against the women and girls, reporting, preventing, and punishing the GBV 2013 agreed on the conclusion of the 57th Commission on the Status of Women, with violence against the women and girls are the priority theme. That outcome document include the strong condemnations to the violence against women and girls in the all context, including conflict and post-conflict context, and calls on states to refrain from invoking the religion, traditions, and customs to avoid the obligations with respect to the addressing VAWG. There are basic references to the gender-related killing and the femicide, women rights defender, and the specially vulnerable populations, and commit the states to respond holistically and comprehensively to prevent and respond to violation against the girls, women and girls. So these are the things which I made it. I'm sure that this lesson will give you a good output to you. And let me stop here.